Chapter 1: The Exit Speech That Never Happens. Ryan Gallis was 31 years old, employed, financially stable, and currently waiting for his relationship to end. The waiting was the most annoying part. Not painful, not tragic, just inconvenient. The realization came on a Tuesday nearly 3 months earlier when his girlfriend, Amber, suddenly developed a social calendar that no longer seemed to include him. At first it had been subtle. A girl's night, then another, then weekends that somehow became unavailable, then old friends reappearing from nowhere, all of them apparently united by a shared belief that the only acceptable form of entertainment involved crowded clubs, loud music, and the complete absence of significant others. Ryan hadn't objected. People were allowed to have friends. People were allowed separate interests. People were allowed lives outside their relationships. But patterns had always been easier for him to notice than most. By the end of the first month, he'd noticed one. By the middle of the second, he'd figured out where it was going. By the end of the second, he was simply waiting for Amber to catch up. His friends disagreed with his approach. Naturally, most of them assumed he should be concerned. "You're too calm about this," Mark had told him over lunch one day. Ryan had shrugged. "What would you like me to do?" "I don't know. Ask questions." "What questions?" Mark had stared at him. "The obvious ones. Questions I already know the answers to?" "That's not the point." Ryan remembered taking a drink of coffee. "No, that's exactly the point." He wasn't stupid. The signs were obvious. Whether Amber was simply checking out of the relationship or actively crossing lines didn't particularly matter. The destination was identical. When somebody begins emotionally packing their bags, eventually the physical bags follow. Ryan had been through something similar years ago. Not the exact same situation. Just enough of one to learn something valuable. You couldn't negotiate attraction. You couldn't bargain somebody into wanting you. And dignity was much easier to keep than to recover. So he hadn't argued, hadn't begged, hadn't monitored her phone, hadn't interrogated her schedule. Instead, he had quietly adjusted. When intimacy stopped feeling mutual, he stopped initiating it. When their futures stopped sounding shared, he started preparing for his own. Nothing dramatic, nothing vindictive, just practical. The same way somebody prepares for winter after noticing the temperature changing. Amber either didn't notice or assumed he remained oblivious. Ryan wasn't sure which explanation was worse. Truthfully, he hoped she found whatever she was looking for. He just didn't particularly care whether he was there when she found it. Which brought him to tonight, 3 months after everything began. 3 months of late nights, rehearsed excuses, distracted conversations, and steadily increasing emotional distance. Ryan sat at the dining room table with his laptop open. The remainder of his attention belonged to a proposal for work. His company was restructuring part of its operations team. His manager trusted him. Senior leadership liked him. The promotion track he'd spent years working toward finally seemed real. For once, he had time to focus on it. Ironically, Amber's withdrawal had freed several hours every week. Not the outcome he'd expected, but not one he intended to waste. The apartment door opened. Ryan glanced at the clock. 9:42 p.m. He returned his attention to his spreadsheet. A few moments passed. No movement, no greeting, no announcement, just silence. He knew without looking. Amber was standing in the entryway, watching him, evaluating, preparing. He continued typing. Footsteps finally crossed the apartment. Not toward him, toward the bedroom. Ryan saved a document, then opened another. 20 minutes passed. He finished revising a budget forecast. The bedroom door opened again. This time he looked up. 2 suitcases. There it was. Finally, he almost smiled. Not because he was happy, because it was nice when a mystery ended. Amber placed the luggage beside the front door. Her posture was stiff, nervous. Ryan recognized the expression. She had spent weeks preparing herself for this conversation. Unfortunately, he hadn't. He'd spent weeks finishing it. Amber walked toward him, stopped several feet away, took a deep breath. "Ryan." Before she could continue, he spoke. "Leave the key on the counter." The words weren't loud or angry. They were simply calm. Amber froze. "What?" "I'll give you 30 days to move the rest of your things." Her eyes widened. Ryan returned his gaze to the laptop. The silence stretched. "I think we need to talk." "Not really." "Ryan, I know what you're going to say." "No, you don't." "I do." His fingers rested on the keyboard. "I just don't need the speech." Amber blinked. "The speech? The part where you've been unhappy for a while. The part where you've changed. The part where you're figuring yourself out. The part where you'll always care about me." Her mouth opened, then closed. Ryan nodded. "See." For a moment he almost felt bad. Almost. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "About 2 months." The answer visibly stunned her. 2 months, give or take. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ryan finally looked at her. Because the answer was obvious. To accomplish what? She had no response. Neither would he have. When somebody starts moving toward the door, pointing at the door doesn't change anything. Amber looked down at the floor. You really don't want to hear what I came to say? No. The honesty seemed to wound more than anger would have. Ryan sighed. 3 years deserved at least a little kindness, so he softened his tone. Look, we had some good years. Amber swallowed. I never meant to hurt you. I know. You do. Most people don't. That wasn't the same thing. Ryan stood and walked to his briefcase. From inside, he removed a folded document. Amber accepted it automatically, then frowned. What is this? Budget adjustments. What? Updated account separation, subscription transfers, utilities, rent calculations. She stared at the paper, then at him, then back at the paper. When did you make this? About 6 weeks ago. The shock returned. Ryan couldn't blame her. Apparently she'd expected him to spend those 6 weeks confused. Instead, he'd spent them organized. You planned all this? No. He shook his head. You did. The apartment fell silent. Neither spoke. Finally, Amber lowered the paper. Tears threatened to form. Ryan felt sympathy, just not regret. There was a difference. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. He believed her. Completely. That was the strange part. He genuinely believed she felt guilty. It just didn't change anything. Don't be. Amber frowned. What? Don't be sorry. Ryan slipped the document back into his briefcase. Just go. The words weren't cruel. If anything, they were merciful. There doesn't need to be a bigger scene than this. The tears finally appeared. Ryan looked away. Not because they bothered him. Because the relationship was already over. This was simply the logistics. Amber stood there another few moments, waiting, for what Ryan wasn't entirely sure. Maybe an argument, maybe anger, maybe a reason to feel less guilty. Instead, she got reality. Eventually, she picked up her suitcases. I hope you're happy. Ryan considered the statement, then nodded. I think I will be. For some reason, that hurt her most of all. She looked away, set her apartment key on the counter, and left. The door closed behind her. The apartment became completely still. Ryan remained standing, waiting, for sadness, for heartbreak, for loneliness, for something, anything. A full minute passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing arrived. Instead, an unfamiliar sensation settled over him. Relief. Immense relief. The kind that follows the end of a problem you've been carrying for far too long. Ryan walked to the window. The parking lot below reflected the glow of streetlights. Car pulled away. Amber disappearing into her future. Good for her. Genuinely. He hoped she found whatever she'd been looking for. But she wasn't his concern anymore. She was his past. Ryan had no interest in living there. He returned to the table, sat down, opened his laptop. The proposal for work remained exactly where he'd left it. Waiting. Unlike people, spreadsheets were wonderfully predictable. Ryan smiled faintly. Tomorrow morning he had a meeting with senior leadership. A month from now he might be a manager. For the first time in 3 months, his future felt entirely his own. He cracked his knuckles and began typing. The chapter had ended. The next one was already waiting. Chapter 2, reclaiming his time. The first thing Ryan Gallis noticed after the breakup was how quiet the apartment had become. Not lonely, just quiet. There was a difference. Loneliness felt like something missing. This felt like something unnecessary finally being removed. 3 weeks later, Ryan sat at his dining table on a Thursday evening, reviewing notes from a meeting with senior leadership while eating takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant. Nobody was arguing about where to order from. Nobody was scrolling through their phone while half listening. Nobody was informing him they already had plans. Just him, a container of pad thai, and a possible promotion. Life was good. His phone buzzed. Mark. Ryan stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello. You're impossible. Good evening to you too. Normal people don't sound that cheerful after a breakup. Ryan glanced at his project notes. I'm eating noodles. That's not the point. It usually is. Mark groaned. Over the years, Ryan had discovered that his friends occasionally became frustrated whenever he refused to participate in his own drama. This was one of those occasions. You should be out doing something. I am. Eating alone doesn't count. It absolutely counts. No, it doesn't. Ryan laughed. How are you married with these opinions? My wife ignores most of them. Smart woman. A female voice appeared faintly in the background. Tell Ryan I heard that. Ryan grinned. Tell Sarah she's my favorite member of your household. You see, Mark said. This is what I'm talking about. You're entirely too comfortable. I'm comfortable because my apartment finally belongs to me again. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Silence followed. Then Mark laughed. A deep, surprised laugh. Oh wow. What? You really are over it. Ryan leaned back in his chair. He thought about the question. Not just over the relationship. Past it. Like a city viewed through a rearview mirror. Still there, technically. Just no longer relevant to where he was headed. Yeah, Ryan admitted. I think I am. Well, Mark sounded almost impressed. Good for you. The conversation ended a few minutes later. Ryan cleaned up dinner and returned to work. A year earlier, he would have spent the evening negotiating around someone else's schedule. Now his time belonged entirely to him. The realization still felt strange, but increasingly it felt nice. 2 weeks later, Ryan got the email. His proposal had been approved. Not only approved, praised. His manager called him into the office less than 10 minutes after the message arrived. Craig Harrison was normally difficult to impress. The man treated compliments like rare and endangered species. That made them valuable. Ryan sat across from his desk. Craig slid a document across the table. "You did good work." Ryan glanced down. A summary of the restructuring recommendations. His recommendations. "Thank you. I'm serious." Craig leaned back. 3 directors signed off on this. Ryan raised an eyebrow. 3 was significant. Craig nodded, apparently reading his expression. "Exactly." For a moment silence settled across the office. Then Craig smiled slightly. "You've been productive lately." Ryan laughed. "I think I've had fewer distractions. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Ryan left the meeting feeling lighter than he had in months. Not because a promotion was guaranteed. Nothing was guaranteed. But he was closer than he'd ever been. Everything seemed to be moving forward. His career, his apartment, his plans, his future. For once, none of it depended on somebody else's indecision. The following Saturday found Ryan standing inside a home improvement store. He needed shelves. What he did not need was the overwhelming variety of shelves available for purchase. There were metal shelves, wooden shelves, floating shelves, industrial shelves, shelves apparently designed by people who hated books. Ryan stared at them all. A voice beside him said, "You look like you're evaluating a hostage situation." Ryan glanced over. An older employee stood nearby. Ryan gestured at the display. "Too many options. I've worked here 8 years." The employee nodded. "That's the correct answer." Ryan laughed. 5 minutes later, he purchased shelves that seemed reasonably capable of supporting objects. A victory by any reasonable definition. On his way home, he noticed banners hanging along several streets. A local community festival. Food vendors. Live music. Charity events. The usual small-town attractions. Normally Ryan would have driven past without much thought. Instead, he found himself slowing down. Then turning. Then parking. Why not? He had nowhere else to be. The day was pleasant. His shelves could wait. The festival occupied several blocks downtown. Families crowded the sidewalks. Local businesses displayed products and services. Live music drifted from a temporary stage. Ryan grabbed a coffee and wandered. No plan. No destination. Just enjoying the afternoon. A surprisingly unfamiliar concept. For years, most weekends had required coordination. Now he could simply decide something and do it. Freedom looked suspiciously underrated. He stopped near a charity auction. A volunteer attempted to convince him to bid on a handcrafted birdhouse. Ryan respectfully declined. Twice. Eventually escaping before becoming the proud owner of a luxury bird residence. A few minutes later, he found himself watching a cooking demonstration. The presenter was explaining something extremely complicated involving pastries. Ryan retained none of the information. His attention had shifted elsewhere. A woman stood nearby. Maybe 30. Dark hair. Jeans. Light blue sweater. She appeared completely absorbed in the demonstration. Then the chef accidentally launched a piece of dough across the stage. The woman burst out laughing. Not politely. Not socially. Actually laughing. The chef looked horrified. The audience applauded. The woman laughed harder. Ryan found himself smiling. A moment later she noticed. There was a brief pause. Then she said, "I swear I wasn't laughing at him." Ryan glanced toward the stage. The chef was now arguing with a pastry. "That seems difficult to prove." She laughed again. "Fair point." Ryan liked her smile immediately. It looked genuine. The kind people wore when they weren't thinking about wearing one. The demonstration concluded. The crowd began moving away. Ryan could have left. Could have continued walking. Could have waited for fate to supposedly decide whether he ever spoke to her again. Instead, he held out a hand. "I'm Ryan." She looked mildly surprised, then amused, as though simple introductions had become unexpectedly rare. "Claire. Nice to meet you." "You too." They shook hands. Neither immediately left. "So," Ryan said, "are you a pastry expert?" "Absolutely not." "Good. Why?" "Because I was concerned you might ask me questions." Claire smiled. "I can barely make toast." "That's a relief." "Your culinary qualifications?" "I own a microwave." "Strong credentials." "Thank you." The conversation continued. Easy. Natural. Neither forcing it. Neither performing. Just talking. After 20 minutes Ryan made a surprising discovery. He wanted the conversation to continue. The realization wasn't dramatic. Just simple. Like noticing good weather. Claire was funny. Direct. Smart. Most importantly, she seemed comfortable being exactly who she was. Something Ryan found increasingly attractive as he got older. Eventually there was a pause. The kind where one conversation ends and another could begin. Ryan made a decision. Life was too short for games. Too short for pretending indifference. Too short for strategic delays and manufactured mystery. He liked talking to her. So he'd say so. Claire. Yeah. I've enjoyed this. Her smile softened slightly. So have I. Good. Ryan nodded once. Would you like to have dinner with me next week? The question landed without hesitation. Without tricks. Without ambiguity. Claire looked pleasantly surprised. That was direct. I've become a fan of direct. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. Honestly, me too. Ryan waited. A grin appeared. I'd like that. For the first time all afternoon, Ryan felt something resembling nervousness. Not anxiety. Not uncertainty. Just anticipation. Great. Great. They exchanged numbers. Simple. Adult. Straightforward. Exactly the way Ryan preferred it. As he walked back toward his car later that afternoon, he caught himself smiling. Not because he had a date, though that was certainly part of it. Because for the first time since the breakup, something new had entered his life that wasn't related to work, recovery, or moving on. Something he genuinely wanted. And unlike the last relationship, this one wasn't beginning with confusion. It was beginning with honesty. Ryan suspected that made all the difference. Chapter 3: Dinner Without Games. Ryan arrived at the restaurant 7 minutes early. Not because he was nervous, because he was Ryan. Being early was the natural state of his existence. Being late generally required a traffic accident, infrastructure failure, or an act of God. The restaurant was small and locally owned, tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop downtown. Quiet enough for conversation. Good food. No live music competing with human speech. A radical concept. The hostess led him to a table near a window. 5 minutes later Claire walked in. Ryan immediately stood. Claire smiled when she spotted him. He noticed she looked different than at the festival. More polished. Slightly dressed up. Still very much herself. Something about that pleased him. Hi. Hi. She sat across from him. Am I late? Ryan checked his watch. No. Claire laughed. You actually checked. I respect punctuality. I can tell. You're only 30 seconds behind schedule. She blinked. You're joking. I am. The relief on her face made him grin. Good. The waitress appeared. Drink orders were placed. Menus were opened. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward. Just unhurried. Claire eventually lowered her menu. I have a question. Ryan looked up. That's usually how dates work. I wasn't sure if this was a date. It is. What if I was hoping to keep you guessing? I'd assume you were bad at communication. Claire laughed. The sound drew a brief glance from a nearby table. I'm starting to appreciate how straightforward you are. I spent enough time around complicated. The words slipped out naturally. Claire's expression softened. The breakup. Ryan nodded. She had known about it before agreeing to dinner. Not details, just the basic fact. He hadn't wanted surprises. Claire rested her arms on the table. Can I ask something? Sure. You seem remarkably okay. Ryan considered the question. It was fair. Most people expected a man ending a 3-year relationship to look devastated. Instead, he was sitting in a restaurant discussing appetizers. I think I finished grieving before it officially ended. Claire nodded slowly. That answer seemed to make sense to her. It was like that? Toward the end, yes. Ryan shrugged. I spent 3 months watching somebody leave. You knew. I knew enough. Claire studied him for a moment. Were you angry? Not really. Seriously. Ryan smiled. I was annoyed. Only annoyed? I had spreadsheets. Claire burst out laughing. The waitress arrived just as Claire was recovering. What can I get started for you too? Claire pointed at Ryan. Before we order, I'd like the record to show this man responded to heartbreak by creating spreadsheets. The waitress looked at Ryan. Ryan nodded. Financial separation documents. The waitress blinked once, then laughed. I've never heard that before. It was surprisingly therapeutic. After the waitress left, Claire shook her head. That's the most Ryan thing I've ever heard. You've known me approximately 26 minutes, and yet I'm confident. Ryan accepted that. Fair enough. The conversation shifted. Unlike many first dates, neither treated it like an interview. Questions appeared naturally. Stories followed. Ryan learned Claire worked as a graphic designer. She loved old bookstores. She had once gotten lost on a hiking trail for 3 hours because she'd insisted the map was wrong. It hadn't been. Ryan enjoyed that story far more than he should have. I eventually found my way back. You followed the map? No. Ryan smiled. What happened? A woman walking her dog pointed at a sign I somehow missed. Ryan nodded. So the dog solved the problem. The dog absolutely solved the problem. The food arrived. Neither noticed the passing time. At some point Ryan realized something. He wasn't trying to impress her. Normally dating involved a degree of performance. People carefully selecting which version of themselves to present. Polishing rough edges. Reducing flaws. selling potential. Tonight felt different. Claire wasn't trying to impress him either. She openly admitted mistakes, teased herself, expressed opinions without checking whether they aligned with his. It was refreshing. More than refreshing. Comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said. "You already have several times. You know what I mean." Ryan took a drink. "Go ahead." Claire tilted her head slightly. "Why did you walk over and introduce yourself at the festival?" The question surprised him. "Because I wanted to. That's it. I thought you seemed interesting. You didn't wait to see if I noticed you first?" "No." "You didn't ask for some friend's opinion?" "No." "You didn't spend 2 days debating it?" Ryan nearly choked on his drink. "No." Claire stared, then laughed. "I'm being serious." "So am I." Ryan leaned back. "Claire, we're adults." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Go on." "I saw someone I wanted to talk to." "Okay. So I talked to her." Claire pointed a finger at him. "You make it sound easy." "It is easy." "No, it isn't. Actually, talking is easy." He gestured between them. "This part." Claire laughed. "The actual relationship part is where things get difficult." "Exactly." Ryan nodded. "Which is why I've never understood why people make the beginning difficult too." For a second, she simply stared at him, then slowly smiled. The expression was different from the others. Less amused, more genuine, more personal. "I like that answer." Ryan felt unexpectedly pleased by that. "Good." The evening continued. Dessert somehow appeared. Both claimed they weren't hungry. Both ate dessert anyway. Predictable human failure. When the bill arrived, Ryan reached for it. Claire reached at the same time. Their hands bumped. Neither immediately moved. The moment lasted half a second. Maybe less, still long enough to notice. Claire withdrew first. Ryan paid. 20 minutes later, they stepped outside. The evening air was cool. Streetlights reflected against shop windows. People wandered up and down the sidewalk. Neither seemed in a hurry to leave. "Well," Claire said. "Well," Ryan agreed. "That was nice." "It was." She smiled. "Still being direct?" "I told you I was a fan." Claire laughed softly, then looked at him. Really looked at him. Ryan noticed the shift immediately. The mood had become quieter, more sincere. "I'm glad you asked me out." The words were simple, but they landed harder than expected. Ryan smiled. "Me too." They stood there for another moment. Then another. Eventually Claire glanced toward her car. "I should head home." "Probably. But..." Ryan shrugged. "But I'd like to see you again." A smile spread across her face. "There it is." "What?" "The direct thing." Ryan laughed. "It worked the first time." "Fair point." She took a step backward. "I'd like that too." The answer created a surprising amount of satisfaction. Not excitement. Not triumph. Something steadier. More substantial. The feeling that something promising had just taken its first real step. They exchanged goodbyes. Claire headed toward the parking lot. Ryan watched her go for a second before turning toward his own car. Halfway there, his phone buzzed. A message. "Claire. For the record, the dog still deserves credit for saving my life." Ryan smiled, then typed back. "I'll thank him if we ever meet." 3 dots appeared instantly. Good answer. Ryan slid his phone into his pocket and continued walking. The night felt light, easy. For months, his life had been consumed by anticipating an ending. Tonight, for the first time in a very long while, he found himself looking forward to a beginning. Chapter 4: No games required. Ryan's phone buzzed Tuesday afternoon. He glanced at the screen while waiting for a report to finish loading. "Claire. Just saw someone walk directly into a glass door." Ryan smiled. "Are they okay?" 3 dots appeared. "Physically, yes. Emotionally, impossible to know." Ryan shook his head. "You seem unusually entertained by this." "I watched it happen in slow motion." "That's fair." A response arrived immediately. "How's work?" Ryan glanced around his office. Stacks of documents. Meeting notes. 3 separate projects. A manager asking for updates every 20 minutes. Oddly enough, he was enjoying it. "Busy. Good busy." "You're the only person I've ever met who says that." "Probably not true." "Feels true." Ryan found himself smiling again before setting the phone down. A month ago, his phone had mostly delivered stress. Now it delivered entertainment. A significant improvement. Their second date happened Thursday. The third happened the following Sunday. Neither spent much time pretending they weren't interested. The simplicity was surprisingly refreshing. Ryan had dated enough to recognize the usual patterns. The delayed responses. The strategic uncertainty. The attempts to appear unavailable. The exhausting dance of pretending enthusiasm was somehow uncool. Claire seemed equally uninterested in any of it, which was fortunate because Ryan had no intention of participating. After their third date, he walked her back toward her car. The evening had been spent exploring a street market and arguing over which food vendor had the best desserts. A debate Claire had lost decisively, at least according to Ryan. "You only won because you're wrong with confidence." "I'll take it." That isn't how debates work. It is if you win. Claire rolled her eyes. You are impossible. Yet somehow you keep agreeing to see me. A smile escaped before she could stop it. Unfortunately, that's true. Ryan liked that smile. Possibly more than was reasonable. They reached her car. Neither immediately opened the door. It was becoming a habit. Conversations stretching beyond wherever they were technically supposed to end. Claire leaned lightly against the vehicle. So, she laughed. You always do that. Do what? Repeat the last word. It's a versatile response. It really isn't. Ryan grinned. Agree to disagree. For a moment they simply stood there. Comfortable. That was the word Ryan kept coming back to. Comfortable. Not because there wasn't attraction. There was plenty. But because nothing felt forced. Nobody was trying to create tension where none existed. Nobody was hiding thoughts behind layers of interpretation. Felt easy. The older Ryan got, the more valuable easy became. Claire tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Can I tell you something? Usually. She laughed softly. Most first dates feel like job interviews. Ryan nodded. That sounded accurate. What makes you think I wasn't secretly evaluating your qualifications? Claire narrowed her eyes. Don't ruin the moment. I apologize. You should. Ryan waited. Eventually she continued. I kept expecting you to start acting differently. Differently how? I don't know. She looked upward while considering. Like most people do. Ryan leaned against the car beside her. Meaning people say they want honesty until honesty becomes inconvenient. That was a surprisingly serious answer. Ryan understood immediately. It wasn't really about dating. It was about disappointment. The accumulated kind. The sort people carried after enough experiences taught them to lower expectations. You've dealt with that before. Claire snorted. Who hasn't? Fair point. She looked at him. You haven't. Ryan thought about Amber. About the previous 3 months. About all the things he'd quietly noticed while pretending not to notice them. I have. Claire blinked, then nodded. Something in her expression softened. Not sympathy. Understanding. The distinction mattered. Then why aren't you cynical? Ryan considered the question carefully. Finally he shrugged. Because being cynical doesn't actually solve anything. Claire stared. No, seriously. That's the answer. Ryan folded his arms. Somebody disappointing me doesn't mean everybody will. She looked at him for several seconds, then smiled. A frustratingly reasonable answer. I practice. You should stop. I'll take it under consideration. She laughed again. That laugh was becoming one of Ryan's favorite sounds. The realization caught him off guard. Not because it was alarming. Because it felt natural. As though his mind had simply accepted her presence. Like she'd always occupied that space. The thought lingered long after the date ended. A week later, Ryan found himself sitting across from Mark during lunch. His friend was watching him with suspicious interest. Ryan recognized the expression immediately. It was the look people got when they thought they had discovered something. Why are you staring at me? Mark pointed. That what? You're smiling. Ryan looked around. I'm eating a sandwich. Exactly. Ryan sighed. This was going nowhere productive. Mark leaned forward dramatically. It's serious. No. It is. It's really not. Mark folded his arms. What's her name again? Ryan continued eating. The silence apparently confirmed everything. Oh wow. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Oh wow what? You like her? I do. Mark looked victorious. There it is. Ryan frowned. What exactly did you think was happening? I thought you were dating. I am dating. And you like her? Yes. Mark pointed triumphantly. So it's serious. Ryan stared at him. Do you hear yourself? I sound wise. You sound 12. Mark ignored him. How many dates? Ryan immediately regretted answering. 5. Mark whistled. 5. It's not a high number. It's 5 more than 0. Ryan couldn't argue with that. Mark leaned back in his chair. The smug expression remained firmly in place. You seem happy. Ryan paused, then nodded. I am. The admission felt surprisingly easy. Simple. Truthful. No qualifiers attached. He genuinely was happy. His work was going well. His promotion remained on track. His apartment finally felt like his own. And Claire had become somebody he looked forward to seeing. Not because she filled a void. Not because she rescued him. Not because she completed him. Ryan hated phrases like that. No, he liked her because she improved already good days. That felt healthier. The following Saturday evening, Claire sat cross-legged on Ryan's living room floor helping assemble one of the bookshelves he'd purchased weeks earlier. Or attempting to. The instructions claimed assembly would require 30 minutes. The instructions were liars. Ryan stared at the diagram. Claire pointed at a panel. I think that's backwards. It isn't. It definitely is. Ryan examined it again. A long silence followed. Then he sighed. It might be. Claire grinned. Thank you. I said might. You absolutely admitted I was right. I'd like the record to reflect my objection. Denied. 20 minutes later, the bookshelf stood complete. Mostly. Ryan stepped back. Claire examined it. The shelf leaned slightly left. Neither spoke. Then simultaneously, "It's crooked." They looked at each other, laughed, and started taking it apart again. As the evening wore on, Ryan realized something. Neither of them was trying to be impressive anymore. The polished versions had disappeared. What's left was better. The real versions, the flawed versions, the comfortable versions. And for the first time in years, Ryan found himself genuinely excited about where something was going. Not because of uncertainty, not because of drama, because for once there wasn't any. And that might have been the most attractive thing of all. Chapter 5, Building Something Real. Ryan realized something was changing the night Claire left a toothbrush at his apartment. Not accidentally. Not because she'd forgotten it. Not because she'd stayed over and found herself unprepared the next morning. She simply walked into the bathroom, set it in the holder beside his, and said, "I got tired of carrying one in my bag." Then she walked back out as if she hadn't casually announced a major relationship milestone. Ryan stood there staring at the toothbrush. Blue. Very blue. Incredibly blue. A bright shade of blue that somehow screamed Claire was here. He looked at it for several seconds before returning to the living room. Claire glanced up from the couch. "Why are you looking at me like that? You brought a toothbrush." "Yes. You just left it there. That's generally how toothbrushes work." Ryan sat beside her. "I feel like we skipped a conversation." "What conversation?" "The toothbrush conversation." Claire looked genuinely confused. "There isn't a toothbrush conversation." "There should be." "Why?" Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She immediately started laughing. "There it is." "What?" "The overthinking." "I do not overthink." "You absolutely do." Ryan considered arguing. Unfortunately, evidence existed. A lot of evidence. Claire leaned against him. "I'm not moving in." "Good. I'm not secretly taking over your bathroom." "Excellent. I just wanted a toothbrush." Ryan nodded. "Reasonable. Thank you." The matter was settled. Somehow. He still didn't entirely understand how. A week later, Ryan was sitting in a conference room listening to a presentation that should have been an email. He maintained a professional expression while internally questioning several life choices. His phone vibrated. A text. "Claire. Emergency." Ryan immediately sat up straighter. "What happened?" The reply arrived seconds later. "A squirrel stole my sandwich." Ryan stared at the screen, then at the screen again. Finally, "A squirrel? A criminal squirrel. Are you okay? Emotionally?" "No." Ryan lowered his head and laughed. The presentation continued. Nobody noticed. His phone buzzed again. It made eye contact while doing it. Ryan typed back. "That was a power move." "Exactly. I'm glad somebody understands." For the remainder of the meeting, Ryan found himself periodically smiling. A few months ago, his phone had delivered relationship stress. Now it delivered updates about sandwich theft. A remarkable improvement. The promotion process continued moving forward. With progress came additional responsibility, additional meetings, additional expectations. Ryan welcomed all of it. Most people found ambition exhausting. Ryan found it satisfying. He liked building things, improving things, solving problems. It helped that his efforts were finally being noticed. One afternoon, Craig stopped by his office. The appearance alone was unusual. The man generally communicated through email despite being physically capable of walking. "You have plans Friday night?" Ryan blinked. "For work. For a dinner." Craig frowned. "People eat during non-business hours." Ryan stared. "You invited me to dinner and somehow made it sound threatening." "I've practiced." Ryan laughed. "Yes, I have plans." Craig nodded. "Good." Then he started walking away. "Wait." Craig stopped. "What? Why did you ask?" "You've been leaving on time lately." Ryan wasn't sure what answer he'd expected. "That wasn't it." "And?" Craig grunted. "You seem happier." With that, he continued walking. Ryan sat there for several seconds, then shook his head. Apparently, even senior management had noticed. The following Friday evening, Ryan and Claire found themselves wandering through an outdoor art festival. The event stretched across several city blocks. Paintings, photography, sculptures, live music, hundreds of people. Ryan had expected Claire to enjoy it. He had not anticipated how competitive she would become. "This one's better." Ryan looked at the painting. "It is not." "It absolutely is. You just like the colors. They're good colors." "That's not a valid judging criterion." Claire gasped. "It absolutely is." They moved to the next exhibit. The debate continued. A nearby artist watched them for nearly 2 minutes before finally speaking. "Are you two art critics?" Ryan and Claire looked at each other. Then simultaneously, "No." The artist laughed. "Good." Ryan pointed at Claire. "She thinks color is an argument." "It is." The artist immediately nodded. "It is." Claire folded her arms triumphantly. Ryan looked betrayed. I thought artists respected objectivity. We don't. Claire's laughter followed them halfway down the block. Later that evening they bought food from a vendor and sat near a fountain. The sun had begun to set. The crowd softened. The atmosphere became quieter. Ryan rested one arm across the back of the bench. Claire sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. The comfortable kind of silence. The kind that didn't require filling. Eventually Claire nudged his shoulder. What are you thinking about? Ryan considered the question. You. Claire blinked, then laughed. That was suspiciously smooth. It wasn't supposed to be. Seriously. Seriously. Ryan took a drink of water. You asked. Claire looked amused. Okay. So I'm answering. And? Ryan shrugged. I'm thinking I like this. The smile gradually disappeared from her face. Not because she was unhappy, because she'd realized he meant it. The moment became more serious, more honest. Ryan kept going. I like spending time with you. Claire remained quiet. I like that you're straightforward, still quiet. I like that you say what you mean. The corners of her mouth began lifting again. Slowly, Ryan looked at her. And I like that you stole my bookshelf project and somehow convinced me it was teamwork. Claire laughed softly. There she is. What? The joke. You were getting emotional. I was being honest. That's even worse. Ryan shook his head. Claire smiled at him. The expression carried warmth now. Genuine warmth. The kind that settled somewhere deeper than attraction. Good. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Good. Good. She leaned against his shoulder. I like this too. The simplicity of the answer made him happier than any elaborate speech could have. No grand declarations. No dramatic moment. Just honesty. Simple and unforced. Exactly the way everything between them seemed to work. Later that night, after dropping Claire home, Ryan sat in his apartment. The blue toothbrush remained in the bathroom. The slightly crooked bookshelf stood against the wall. The place looked increasingly shared. Not physically. Emotionally. He found he didn't mind. In fact, he liked it. A lot. For years he'd assumed strong relationships required intensity, complication, constant effort. Now he was beginning to suspect something else. Maybe the strongest relationships felt lighter. Not because they mattered less. Because the right person wasn't a burden to carry. They walked beside you instead. Ryan smiled to himself. Then sent Claire a message. For the record, color is still not a valid artistic argument. The response arrived less than 10 seconds later. You're wrong. Ryan laughed. Somehow that answer made him even happier. Chapter 6 More than convenient. Ryan's promotion became official on a Tuesday. The announcement arrived at 8:13 a.m. By 8:14 half the office knew. By 8:20 the other half had opinions about it. By 8:35 somebody had already asked him for a favor that technically fell outside his responsibilities. Ryan took that as confirmation he was management now. His new office wasn't particularly impressive. Slightly larger. A window. A door that actually closed. The real difference was the workload. The responsibilities he expected. The meetings he expected. The sheer volume of decisions that suddenly belonged to him was somewhat larger than anticipated. Still, he'd worked years for this. He wasn't about to complain when he finally got it. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Congratulations, manager man. Ryan smiled. That's not my official title. It is in my heart. That somehow makes it worse. 3 dots appeared. Do managers get commemorative hats? No. Missed opportunity. Ryan shook his head. A second message arrived. Proud of you. The smile slowly returned. Simple. 3 words. No exaggeration. No performance. Just sincerity. Ryan reread the message once before putting his phone away. Oddly enough, that single text meant more than the official announcement had. The first few weeks brought an unexpected challenge. Not the job. The balance. For years Ryan's schedule had belonged entirely to him. Now people seemed determined to fill every available minute. Meetings multiplied. Responsibilities expanded. Problems arrived from directions previously unknown. The work itself wasn't difficult. The hours were. One Thursday evening he checked the time and immediately cursed. 6:47 p.m. He was supposed to meet Claire at 7. Across town. Ryan grabbed his phone. Running late. I'm sorry. The reply came 30 seconds later. How late? Ryan did quick mental math. Then some optimistic mental math. Then realistic mental math. 25 minutes. A pause. Then, okay. Drive safely. No passive-aggressive comment. No guilt trip. No hidden irritation. Just okay. Ryan appreciated that more than she probably realized. He still arrived 32 minutes late. Claire looked up as he entered the restaurant. The smile she gave him immediately erased most of his frustration. Most. Not all. Traffic deserved consequences. Ryan slid into the seat across from her. I'm sorry. You already said that. I'm sorry again. Claire laughed. The second one doesn't count. It should. It doesn't. He loosened his tie. What if I make it official? I think that's called an apology memo. Ryan snorted. Management humor already. You're rubbing off on me. The waiter arrived. Orders were placed. Only after he left did Ryan realize something. Claire looked tired. Not unhappy, just tired. The same way he felt. It occurred to him that he'd spent the entire week focused on the promotion and hadn't asked how hers was going. Ryan frowned. How's work? Claire immediately pointed at him. There it is. What? The guilty face. I have a guilty face? You absolutely have a guilty face. Ryan leaned back. Answer the question. Claire smiled. Then sighed. Busy. Bad busy. No. She considered it. Just busy. The answer sounded familiar. Ryan recognized it because he'd been giving the same one. For a moment both sat quietly. Then Claire laughed. What? We're becoming adults. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Became. No. She pointed between them. This. What is this? This thing where we're discussing calendars and work stress. I discussed a stolen sandwich with you 3 weeks ago. That's true. Ryan smiled. I still blame the squirrel. You should. Claire picked up her glass. Unrepentant criminal. They both laughed. The tension faded. But not completely, because something had changed. Not between them. Around them. Life was becoming fuller. More complicated. More demanding. The question wasn't whether they liked each other. That part had become increasingly obvious. The question was whether they could continue making room for each other when life got crowded. Neither voiced the thought. Both felt it. Saturday afternoon provided an answer. At least part of one. Ryan spent 4 hours handling unexpected work issues. By the time he finished, his carefully planned day had fallen apart. He stared at his phone. Several canceled plans. Several missed opportunities. An overwhelming desire to sit in silence. Instead he called Claire. She answered on the third ring. Hello. Do you want honest Ryan or positive Ryan? Claire immediately laughed. Honest. I'm tired. Okay. I've spent my day fixing problems. Okay. I don't have the energy for much. There was a brief pause. Then, good. Ryan blinked. Good. You told me. The answer caught him off guard. Claire continued. You didn't disappear. You make that sound impressive. Unfortunately, it is. Ryan understood exactly what she meant. People often withdrew when stressed. Avoided conversations. Avoided vulnerability. Avoided admitting they needed anything. He'd done it himself before. More than once. Fair point. Claire's voice softened. Do you want company? Ryan considered it. The answer arrived immediately. Yeah. Good. You don't mind doing nothing? Nope. You don't have plans? I do now. Ryan smiled. An hour later she arrived carrying takeout. They ate on the couch. Watched a terrible movie. Made fun of plot holes. Talked about absolutely nothing important. And somehow it became one of Ryan's favorite evenings with her. Not because anything memorable happened. Because nothing needed to happen. Neither was performing. Neither was entertaining. Neither was trying to make the day special. They were simply together. By the time the movie ended, Claire was curled against his side. Ryan looked down at her. She noticed. What? He thought for a moment. Then decided honesty was still the best option. Nothing. Claire narrowed her eyes. That's suspicious. Ryan smiled. I was just thinking. Dangerous. Usually. What about? He looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who never played games. Who communicated directly. Who showed up when she said she would. Who somehow made even difficult weeks feel lighter. You make things easier. The words escaped before he thought about them. Claire's expression softened. For several seconds she didn't speak. Then she leaned over and kissed his cheek. A small gesture. Simple. Sincere. Good, she said quietly. Ryan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the apartment felt warm, comfortable, safe. A year ago, Ryan might have assumed relationships were supposed to feel dramatic, passionate, chaotic. Now he was beginning to understand something better. The right person didn't create turbulence. The right person became peace. And as Claire settled closer beside him, Ryan found himself wondering if this was what building something real actually felt like. Chapter 7, Letting Down the Walls. Ryan didn't realize he had a habit until Claire pointed it out. The discovery happened on a Wednesday evening, which annoyed him, mostly because Claire was right, and because she'd figured it out before he had. You disappear. Ryan looked up from the cutting board. What? Claire sat at the kitchen counter watching him prepare dinner. You disappear. I am literally standing right here. You know what I mean? Ryan sighed. Unfortunately, he did. Explain. Claire considered him for a moment. When something bothers you, you don't talk about it. I talk. You provide updates. He frowned. Those are different? Very. Claire looked almost amused. You tell me what happened. That's talking. No. She pointed at him with a carrot she'd stolen from the cutting board. Talking is telling me how you feel about what happened. Ryan stared, then pointed at the carrot. First, that's mine. I've already eaten half of it. Ryan ignored this. Second, I don't understand the distinction. Claire laughed. I know. That wasn't encouraging. Ryan resumed chopping vegetables. The conversation lingered in the back of his mind for the rest of the evening. Unfortunately, it followed him into the next day. And the day after that. Because the more he thought about it, the more he realized Claire wasn't entirely wrong. When things went wrong, Ryan focused on solving them. Fixing problems. Creating plans. Taking action. He preferred solutions over discussion. Results over processing. Which worked extremely well at work. Less so with human beings. The realization became unavoidable a week later. Project at work went sideways. Not catastrophically. Just enough to create headaches. A vendor missed deadlines. Schedules shifted. Several departments became unhappy simultaneously. The normal manager experience, according to Craig. Ryan privately believed that wasn't the comforting statement Craig thought it was. By Friday evening he was tired. Not physically. Mentally. The kind of tired that settled behind your eyes. Usually he would have handled it alone. Gone quiet for a few days. Worked through the problem. Emerged later with a solution. Instead, he found himself sitting across from Claire at dinner, apparently remembering a conversation about disappearing. Unfortunately, long week, Claire asked. Ryan nodded. Normally he would have left it there. Instead he heard himself continue. Actually, yes. Claire stopped eating. That caught his attention. You look surprised. I am. Ryan rolled his eyes. Very supportive. You usually answer that question with one word. Fair. She smiled. What happened? Ryan explained. The project. The delays. The frustrations. The pressure. Claire listened quietly. When he finished, she nodded. That sounds exhausting. Ryan waited. Then blinked. That's it. What did you want? A solution. Claire laughed. I don't have one. That's disappointing. It sounds like you have it handled. Ryan frowned. I do. Then why are we discussing it? The answer arrived before he could stop it. Because it was bothering me. Claire's smile softened. There it is. Ryan pointed at her. Stop being right. No. Reasonable people occasionally allow others to win. I'll look into it. The conversation moved on. The problem remained. The workload remained. Yet somehow Ryan felt lighter. A little. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. The discovery irritated him. Apparently sharing problems actually helped. Annoying. A few weeks later, Ryan found himself helping Claire move furniture. Not apartments. Just furniture. An important distinction. Her living room was being reorganized. At least that was the official explanation. Ryan suspected she simply enjoyed creating projects. The couch had already changed positions twice. A bookshelf 3 times. A lamp had somehow been moved to 4 separate locations. The lamp appeared exhausted. Ryan certainly was. You know, he said, adjusting the couch another 6 inches. There's a chance the original layout was fine. Claire gasped. What a reckless statement. I stand by it. You shouldn't. Ryan laughed. The couch finally settled into place. Claire stepped back, examined the room, then nodded. Perfect. Ryan looked around. It appeared almost identical to the previous arrangement. He wisely kept that observation to himself. Claire crossed to him. Thank you. You're welcome. A quiet moment followed. Comfortable. Familiar. Ryan noticed how naturally that word applied to her now. Familiar. Not predictable. Not boring. Steady. Like someplace he belonged. The thought settled unexpectedly deep. Claire seemed to notice his expression change. What? Ryan hesitated. Months ago he would have kept the thought entirely to himself. Months ago he would have dismissed it, analyzed it, filed it away. Now he found himself speaking. You've become important to me. The words hung in the air. Claire blinked. Not because she was surprised, because she understood the significance. Ryan wasn't naturally dramatic. He never had been. Which meant when he said something like that, he meant it completely. A slow smile appeared. You've become important to me too. Simple. Honest. Perfect. Ryan stepped closer. So that's convenient. Claire laughed. Very romantic. I try. You really don't. That's fair. She slid her arms around his waist. Ryan wrapped his around her shoulders. The room settled into comfortable silence. Neither seemed eager to break it. Eventually Claire rested her chin against his chest. Can I tell you something? Usually, you make relationships feel less complicated. Ryan smiled. I think that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm serious. So am I. Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded, as if reaching a decision. I think that's why this works. Ryan looked down at her. Why? Because neither of us is waiting for the other person to become somebody else. The statement hit him harder than expected. Because it was true. There was no project, no rescue operation, no fantasy. He wasn't trying to change Claire. She wasn't trying to change him. Instead, they simply kept choosing each other. Every day. The simplicity felt almost revolutionary. Later that night, After Ryan returned home, he sat on his couch thinking. The old version of himself would have expected relationships to feel different. More dramatic, more uncertain, more difficult. For a long time, he'd mistaken emotional turbulence for passion. Mistaken unpredictability for excitement. Mistaken anxiety for investment. Now he knew better. What he felt with Claire wasn't uncertainty. It was confidence. Not because the future came with guarantees. Nothing did. But because every challenge they'd faced had made them communicate more honestly, not less. Every difficult conversation had brought them closer rather than pulled them apart. Ryan smiled to himself. Months ago, he'd watched one chapter of his life end. At the time, he'd assumed the biggest victory was surviving it. Now he understood something else. The real victory wasn't moving on. It was finding someone who made moving forward feel effortless. And for the first time in a very long while, Ryan wasn't thinking about protecting himself from the future. He was looking forward to it. Chapter 8 Forward Together. Ryan knew he was in trouble when Craig Harrison started smiling. Not often. Not dramatically. Just enough to make everyone in the office uncomfortable. The first time happened during a Monday morning meeting. Ryan finished presenting quarterly numbers and looked up. Craig nodded, then smiled. A little. The room immediately became suspicious. After the meeting ended, one of the department supervisors pulled Ryan aside. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "The smile." Ryan sighed. "Yes. I didn't like it." "Neither did I." The supervisor nodded seriously. "Something's happening." Ryan left before the conversation could become more ridiculous. Still, he couldn't deny things were going well. The promotion no longer felt new. The responsibilities had become routine. Problems still appeared daily, but they no longer felt overwhelming. For the first time in his career, Ryan felt genuinely confident in his position. Not because he knew everything, because he knew he could handle whatever showed up. The feeling followed him throughout the rest of the week. For the first time in years, every major piece of his life seemed stable. Work, home, relationships, future. It was a strange sensation. Ryan wasn't used to stability feeling exciting. Thursday evening found him sitting across from Claire at their favorite restaurant. Not the fanciest place in town. Not the newest. Simply the restaurant where they'd shared their first date. The coincidence had actually been Claire's idea. Ryan suspected she'd chosen it deliberately. Claire studied the menu. "What are you looking at?" "The same thing I ordered last time." "Why?" "Because it was good." "That's boring." Ryan shrugged. "It was also efficient." Claire laughed. "You somehow turned dinner into project management." "That's a transferable skill." "No." The waiter arrived. Orders were placed. Drinks appeared. The familiar rhythm settled between them. Easy conversation. Comfortable teasing. The effortless back and forth that had become second nature. Halfway through dinner, Claire set her glass down. "You've been staring at me." Ryan blinked. "I have not." "You absolutely have." "Evidence." Claire pointed. "Eyes. Strong case." "Thank you." Ryan laughed, then stopped, because she wasn't entirely wrong. He had been watching her. Not consciously, just noticing. The way she smiled when she found something funny. The way she talked with her hands when she became passionate about a subject. The way she occupied space without apologizing for existing. The simple confidence in who she was. Months ago he'd noticed she was attractive. Now he noticed everything else, and somehow liked those things even more. Claire tilted her head. "There it is again." "What?" "The thinking face." Ryan smiled. Apparently he had one of those too. "Unfortunate." Claire leaned forward. "What are you thinking about?" Normally Ryan would have deflected, made a joke, changed the subject. Instead he found himself answering honestly. "You." The reply came so quickly Claire laughed. "At least you're consistent." Ryan nodded. "I try." The laughter faded. The moment remained. Something quieter settled over the table. Claire noticed it too. He could tell. Their conversation slowed. Not awkwardly, just thoughtfully. Ryan looked at her. Really looked at her. Then he realized something. For months he'd carefully avoided forcing grand moments. Neither of them needed dramatic declarations. Neither needed games. Neither needed emotional fireworks. But there was a difference between avoiding drama and avoiding honesty. And lately Ryan had been thinking about the future. A lot. Not because he was worried. Because he wanted one. With her. The realization no longer felt surprising. It simply felt true. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You're doing it again." Ryan exhaled slowly, then smiled. "Probably." The expression she returned was curious, patient, waiting. Ryan shook his head. "You know, you're right." Claire blinked. "I'm going to need more information than that. I make things into projects. That's not news. Fair." Ryan folded his hands together. "When something matters to me, I evaluate it." Claire immediately laughed. "You absolutely do." "I assess risks." "Definitely." "I make plans. Without question." Ryan nodded. "Exactly." Claire smiled. "Where is this going?" Ryan looked directly at her. The answer felt simple. uncomplicated, exactly like everything good between them. It's going toward the fact that you're the best part of my day. The smile vanished from her face, not from unhappiness, from surprise. Ryan continued, most days you're the thing I look forward to. Claire remained very still. I like my job. A small smile returned. I know. I like my life. I know that too. Ryan nodded. Good. Then he shrugged. And the truth is, I like it more with you in it. The silence lasted several seconds, the kind filled with emotion rather than discomfort. Claire's eyes softened. Ryan. He smiled. There isn't a speech coming. That made her laugh. Of course it did. You sure? Very. Ryan leaned back slightly. I'm just telling you the truth. Claire shook her head, a smile pulling at her lips. You know what's funny? What? Most people spend months trying to be impressive. Ryan frowned. I am impressive. See? That. Ryan laughed. Claire reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture felt natural, comfortable, like something they'd been doing forever. You know what I think? Ryan squeezed her hand lightly. What? I think you're worth all the directness. The answer made him unexpectedly happy. Not because it was romantic, because it was Claire. Honest. Simple. Exactly what she meant. Nothing more. Nothing less. Ryan looked down at their joined hands, then back at her. For a moment neither spoke. They didn't need to. The answer was already there. The future wasn't some distant possibility anymore. It was something they were actively building. One conversation. One choice. One day at a time. Together. Later that evening they walked through downtown after dinner. Streetlights illuminated the sidewalks. Storefront windows reflected golden light onto the pavement. The city felt calm. Claire slipped her hand into his. Ryan glanced down, then smiled. What? She asked. Nothing. Her eyes narrowed. That's never true. Ryan laughed. Probably. They continued walking. No destination. No urgency. Just moving forward. And for perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ryan realized he wasn't wondering whether someone would stay. He wasn't waiting for signs. Wasn't analyzing behavior. Wasn't preparing for disappointment. He was simply present. Confident in what they had built. Confident in who Claire was. Confident in who he was with her. The future remained unwritten. But for once, that didn't feel uncertain. Felt exciting. Ryan squeezed her hand gently as they disappeared down the sidewalk together. Whatever came next, they would meet it the same way they'd begun. Honestly, directly, and side by side.